Now, let's have a conversation on media and the media landscape and what's happening to the media industry. As we discussed today, the newspapers on their deathbed. This conversation has been there for a while, over a decade now. Newspapers on their deathbed. What's for a fact is that the circulation numbers for newspapers have dwindled over the years. What also is there for a fact is because of various factors, including that circulation and including competing interests, the revenues generated by newspapers have also reduced. But let's have that conversation. And joining us now in the Situation Room on the hot seat is Clay Muganda. Clay is a writer and editor with the Standard Group. Clay, karibu sana.
Thank you. I didn't know that this is the hot seat.
It's a hot seat. Yeah. And that's like, come to the mic. Come to the mic. Come to the mic. Closer.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's okay.
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Now
Yeah,
that this
good,
is
good.
the hot seat.
This is what happens here. So we have, had this conversation very many times in terms of, the fate of the newspaper. We're not talking about media. We're talking about print media in this particular case, the newspaper. When we had the media conversation the other day, we had in the studio here the CEO of the Standard Group, Orlando Liomu, and on the line was the chairman of Radio Africa Group, which publishes the Star newspaper. And when we asked that question of what's happening to, especially the newspaper industry, there was something that the two gentlemen agreed. Also in the studio was Churchill Otieno from the Nation Media Group. But the two gentlemen agreed that the fortunes of newspapers are changing. But because of these changes in the fortunes of the newspapers, there's something that we are also noticing, that when you move into digital space, revenues go down. When you look at a paper, this is if you see a full page ad on a paper, the amount of money that full page ad on a paper is generating, it'll take you so much to generate the same on the digital platforms. And this is something that the media owners and media managers are having to grapple with. But there's also the other effect to journalism. Very many media houses across the globe, because of all these now dwindling fortunes, are having to let go of journalists. What's your take on the whole skip?
Okay, fine. Of course, yes, with the entry of social media, there was bound to be a disruption. And I think the only way probably to keep up, or the only way to stay afloat, was to either change very fast or probably try to keep up. And that's why you find that some media houses have decided to go like digital first. Yeah, okay, fine. In the Kenyan situation, there are actually a number of factors that actually have led to the dwindling fortunes of newspapers as we know it, the physical paper. And it's not just the physical paper alone that is actually affected in Kenya. It is basically like the whole media landscape is hemorrhaging, it's suffering. And it's not, it's a number of factors. Some of them is actually also the poor economy, because I believe in some countries, media is just doing fine. I mean, better than us. There's the issue of the economy. Then there's this also another thing that at some point Kenyans just started hating the mainstream media. And it's not that social media is offering any alternative, because we keep on hearing that, social media is taking over. But social media does not write itself, because Kenyan media houses or Kenyan newspapers actually have a very big presence on the digital space too. Yeah. But back to why newspapers are probably going, the fortunes are dwindling, the disruption caused by social media, where actually there were stronger or rather bigger outlets, bigger digital media outlets, or the ones that actually managed to monetize their content much faster than the newspapers. And like in Kenya also, as he said, that I think a full page ad in the newspaper is upwards of maybe 3 million. It depends on the day. Yeah, it depends on the day and also the publication. And you cannot get that in the Kenyan digital space. But there are places where actually digital space can actually attract that much money.
Yep.
Yeah, for an ad. So the economy affects both sides, both the physical and the digital space. Yeah. And I think this is not my biggest problem, or actually our biggest problem has been there is an antipathy or some hatred, towards the mainstream media. That one actually has played a very big role.
This is across the globe?
No, I'm talking about Kenya. Yeah, there's that antipathy also against the mainstream media, and it has come in the form of punitive legislation and actually just a statement by the president like gazeti ni ya kufunga nyama. That's good enough to actually sway his followers, and they just feel like, okay, fine, we don't need these things anymore.
Yeah.
And I think also we took a little bit some time to adapt. Yeah.
Does that then affect the evolution then of media then from, a physical paper to a digital form, whereby in other countries, right off the bat, as this was introduced, people began to subscribe to the paper on their phone or on their tablet or whatever, realizing that this was the way in which, that part of the world was moving. So does the sentiment within geographical boundary of the media then affect the evolution of the same to another platform?
Yeah, I did mention that we did take long actually to evolve, or rather to move to that digital space. And by we taking long to move to that digital space, it's not just the media alone, because it's even the readership. Very many years ago, over 10 years ago, Pulse, the standard publication on Friday, tried to actually put a paywall on their site.
Yep.
The first people to complain were Kenyans in the diaspora.
Yep.
So we have this thing about like it's online, it's supposed to be free. Yeah, so even that one of people actually seeing that I need to buy this, that one also became a problem. The initial bloggers, people who were quite big during that time, they could not monetize even their own content. Yeah, it was very difficult to monetize. So that one also played a big role in actually making the media not move to the digital space at faster than the other countries did, or at that same speed. So the media itself took long to move to that digital space. Probably they needed to move to that place and let people know like this is the way to go. But also the readers also took time to adopt. Yeah. Adapt to that.
If we talk about that, if we look globally, all media houses initially struggled with the concept of the paywall, because the approach was that because I've been selling you the paper at 60 shillings, a hard copy, I'm going to sell you 60 shillings newspaper on soft copy. Or if you're going to access any of my stories, you have to come and pay to read the story. And if you look at that, there has been an evolution on how various publications are now running around their paywalls. Some are offering specific content that you now subscribe to, specific content that you get, and you pay a certain amount just for the kind of content that you want. And which allows you now to access more and more information from various publications for the same amount of money. I think it's all about how the managers are approaching this paywall concept.
Yeah, but you also have to understand, like it's taken also some time for the technology to get to this place of smartphones. I think like the first time smartphones came, phones came to Kenya, mobile phones, mobile telephony. For around 3 or 4 or 5 years, we just had the normal phones,
Yep.
The most you could do was text. But then as technological advance, then you get to all these things like now you can share a newspaper, you can read your newspaper on the go, you can access it, it's easily accessible. So I think even in those other countries also, it was this moving from the physical to the digital space. I think almost probably everywhere it was not fast enough, or probably we did not know how to go about it. Yeah, I think either one came too fast, like here the smartphones came too fast, and the other industry was not ready, or they still did not know how actually to move ahead, to move in tandem with the advances in this technology where you can get everything on your phone. Yeah, I believe probably that's where we maybe dropped the ball. Yeah.
Do you think that there would be an appetite for consumption? I mean, let's say it was widespread. I mean, you talked about mobile telephony and then the acceptance of people then, reading a newspaper digitally. Because if you want to compare with Europe, before I get to that question, if you want to compare with Europe and look at major newspapers like The Sun and Le Croix and then the Washington Post and such, what they did was that you had access to a headline, and if you wanted to read the rest of the story, then they asked you to then pay for it. But this is against the backdrop of the fact that so much else was already in the digital space for consumption, whether it was media, whether it was other things, shopping and the e-commerce had already burst through. So here, as we're looking at things now, do you think that there's adequate consumption then for then media practitioners to say we're going to make sure that all of this content is available and we would be sure that it would be consumed?
First of all, what is the penetration? What is our target audience here? Okay, most of our relatives probably now, even our grandmothers, and they have smartphones or mobile phones. I mean, or the normal phone, not just a smartphone. But then we have to ask what percentage of our readership actually will feel the urge, like, let me go and check the news on the phone.
Right.
Yeah, let me go and watch TV on the phone. Because there are very many factors there are very many things that you have to factor in. There is airtime. Yeah.
There's data. Yeah.
There's data. Yeah. That one also needs to be factored in. While it's probably easier in towns or in cities or probably in Nairobi for the young to access it. And you see here is a case where you're trying to reach the farmer down there in Konoin, You want to reach the poultry guy somewhere in Mandera. You get. And this is somebody actually who is probably on the move and needs something like this, needs to get his news or her news on the phone. But what is their level of digital literacy in as much as he's aware that actually I can get my news on the phone? That is something that actually I think we're not probably looking at, or probably we are glossing over it and thinking that Nairobi is Kenya.
Giving that comparison of what a print media offers and the target audience for a print media and the consumers of print media versus the consumers of digital media, digital platforms, and you're saying that those two are different.
Yeah, I would tend to think so, because what happens is, you see, most people in the cities or these technologically savvy young men and women are more likely probably to check their phone and see what's going on when they want to check the news and all that.
Yeah.
Those people down there who probably have the knowledge that they can, but they still tend to think like, okay, nitasoma gazeti,
So are you saying that is the only left audience for newspapers?
I don't think it is the only left audience per se, but I'm just saying that what is going on is that the younger people are more likely. They're older people. I mean, I am old myself. I read my news online. You see, the younger people. Some of them don't actually even read news either online or in the newspaper.
Basically, the industry you're in makes it easier for you to keep up with technology. There are many people who, in the 21st century or in the information age, are completely lost, not because of an inability, but there's nothing to encourage them or to propel them to actually keep up with those times.
Actually, yes. I think that is the demographic I was talking about.
Yes.
That's a demographic I'm talking about, and I'm sorry to say farmers, because we have this thing that farmers are old people and stuff like that.
So basically you're talking about
rural
population.
Rural population.
Okay.
And actually even urban, there's some section of urban population also
that doesn't have access.
That does not have access, or probably they find it a bit costly and stuff. So there's that demographic, and it's not about age. It's about it's across the age. The age groups. They're the old ones, then they're the young ones actually who don't have access. So I think what we need to do is to find a way of either tapping into all this. If you're to sell news, if we are to say like we're only going digital, then we have to find a way of actually tapping into all this and bringing everybody into this digital space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me
and then we have
Peter.
To find a way of how to monetize it.
Yeah. Peter, good morning. And we also have Verah Okeyo, who is a global health reporter and media researcher. Verah, good morning as well.
Hi.
Hi, Verah. So, Vera, you've had the conversation that we are having. We're talking about, the place and space of print media in the country, and in this new era of technology, where do you see print?
These days, I tend to not define print because of the product, like the newspaper. I would like to see the print journalism or the print as the process of how we produce the journalism itself. Because the definition of what print and broadcast and digital keeps changing every now and then because of our world as it is. So if we are looking at print as the newspaper, I don't think that's going to be here for a while. And even if it's going to be here, it's not going to be financially sustainable because, print has always relied on advertising a lot. And that's not happening at the moment as it should be. Remember, producing a good quality paper also has its cost as well, apart from paying the reporters and the followers and the production, the whole chain of production.
Yeah.
What I think print can do to survive is kind of like have a hybrid situation. Like I'll give legacy media like The Guardian. They're still very big online, but they're still not neglected producing their quarterly or whatever magazines that they do and their newspaper. But a lot of effort and money goes into developing the digital as it is developing the print side.
Vera, just stay on the line. We need to get you on a clearer line because I think there's issues with this one. Just stay on the line, and John will try and sort this out as we continue the conversation. How do we define print then? Is it print, the hard copy, or is it print journalism?
Eric, may I just say something here?
Yeah.
You see, if you divorce print journalism from just the effects of the digital age and print, then perhaps we may not fully understand this because one cannot be divorced from the other. I'm thinking of
what can be divorced from what?
Print media cannot be divorced from the reality of the digital age and everything else around it. Because it all involves what you call consumption by people who have an interest in that particular industry. There are people whose learning for the longest time was purely on print, meaning books. Now, that has changed dramatically, but it's only those who have this availed to them, as Clay was saying, who would consider it as something that is important. But those who don't have, they may hear of it, they may even understand its importance, but again, it isn't available. So again, there are people who may even understand technology, but because of culture and habit, they will never read the news on their phones. They want to see a hard copy. They want to see
Don't turn a page.
Otherwise, they don't actually feel the reading.
Because I don't think the book industry, as it were physical, is dying. I mean, the people who actually can they can buy Kindle and buy all these things, but they still buy books.
Right.
Yes, so I think there'll always be maybe 10, 20, 30 people who will still buy the physical paper,
So will that make that business commercially viable? If you get the circulation numbers really dropping to that level, and you need to print on a daily basis, is it going to change the business model? Maybe say newspapers are going to be weekly.
Do you remember I'm trying to remember who it is who said this. Was it the chairman of Radio Africa, or was it our CEO? I'm trying to remember who said this, but they said, you see, we are so competitive, we do not think of the reality of our industry.
Toski Prono, yes.
Yes, he said, if, for instance, we decided that one of the many top media houses would be in charge of printing for all the papers, said we would reduce our cost tremendously.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the issue of cost now already automatically makes you competitive. If we then again pooled our transport in terms of distribution in the same way, again, we'd reduce. Even as he said it, it became obvious that it is because of the rigidity of thought. Because people hang on to something that worked in the past and may not necessarily work now, that this discussion is taking place and the quagmire that we speak of actually exists.
I'm also thinking that, I think a narrative has been fed that because the newspaper is dying in certain parts of the world, that must be the trend that would happen here. And who's to say that different forms of traditional media then cannot still be consumed in this neck of the woods? Would you say that it's possible for us to do both? Just like you've talked about, Clay, just now, that people are buying books, but then the book industry is still making these same publications available on digital media. It doesn't mean that one side of it has disappeared. It just means that it is accommodating new media. Is it not possible that the newspaper could still thrive
That's
here?
why I said, because
Is it thriving?
Yeah,
Is it not possible that it could?
No,
that's,
is it?
That's why I was actually saying that in our environment, the problem is actually an antipathy towards mainstream media. So even if you go digital, because I don't think that actually right now when we go to on digital platforms, our publications, when we go on digital platforms, that actually we get so many ads, we still attract more ads, or we get more revenue than
the hard copy.
than hard copy. I don't think so. I don't have the
It
figures.
is the
but
business models, it's
but
the
I don't
approaches.
think
It's
so.
not necessarily that because there's antipathy. And I'll come and tell you, let's take a quick break and I'll tell you, these people who are spending their 10 hours a day on a mobile phone, what are they consuming? They're consuming information. What is it that newspapers sell? Information. So-
Then what you're trying to say is that it's our content. It's the content
It's
that
the
actually
approach of the content.
It's
And
they-
how that content is presented.
Yes.
yeah, but you
Because
see,
people are still consuming the same content. Today, if you ask people whether Aidan Duale is still the leader of the majority, many people will tell you, Aidan Duale, something has happened to him. They know. And it's the same information that we sell on
But they
newspapers
may
on a
not
daily
necessarily
basis.
have the details that you would have
Yes.
if you read the newspaper.
if you read the whole story.
Yes.
Because
If you
I-
took
I
interest.
I tend to see sometimes like even local stories, people read the headline
And the first paragraph.
and then they react.
Verah Okeyo, global health reporter and media researcher, is back on the line. And Verah, before we took a break from you, you were saying you don't see print media being around for long.
Yeah, but I would like to have that's not a death sentence. Like print media, I tend to look at it as a product and the process of producing that news. But as we were talking, I would like to just respond to what my colleague there was saying. I like to work with data, and the reason Reuters Institute Journalism Digital Report did say that it's true. Like the print is dying. It's not an illusion. It's not like it's not there. But what we cannot do, we cannot compare journalism to the publishing industry, because the purpose of what journalism does to the society is different from. You never see people congregate together on Twitter having an uproar about a book the same way we would congregate on Twitter for a news that was broadcast, because journalism plays a democratic role. When we come in, it's actually a public sphere, which the book and the publishing industry isn't. So we cannot compare what's happening in the publishing industry
To what's happening in the
a cause and effect. No, you cannot. It's like comparing not even apples and oranges. It's comparing proteins and carbohydrates, because they serve very different purposes to our body. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that the fact that the publishing industry is still thriving, I'm not sure. I've not checked the data. Does not mean that that's the same thing that's happening to the print.
What data do you have about the print industry, the newspaper publications?
Reuters is not actually the print, it's the consumption of how we the way we consume news.
Yep.
The digital report, that institute produces it annually, and it's actually the growth of WhatsApp and social media, and even Instagram as a source of consuming news has grown exponentially, and not in just the ages between 18 and 30 as people would think. It's even people who are age 58, thereabout. Because the issue about the printing is like, I need to have time to sit down and read the newspaper, and that's something that most people do not have now, because you have this alternative use. I will take notice of the growth of the podcast, particularly, where you write a story, And newspapers like The Atlantic voices that story for you to listen to it. Like it was written in the paper, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you can listen to it as you're driving. So there's also those things, the Internet of Things, as our life is being changed by the internet, and it also taking a toll on how we consume information. Not that we do not like the digital, we have a culture for not liking the digital. It's just the convenience in it.
It's a consumption trend, and I tend to agree with what you're saying, Verah. And I think that's what I was saying even before we went to the break. The consumption trends of people are changing. When you talk about how people would buy the newspaper, you buy the newspaper in the morning, and you're either reading it as you're having your tea, you're reading it in the car, you're reading it in the office the first thing before you start your day, or on Sundays you're reading it as you chill, as you're basking in the morning sun. Nowadays, you're consuming information on a regular basis throughout your day, not regimented like it used to be when newspapers were right. Yeah, I have to buy the paper and then I have to find time to read the paper. So you're consuming the information a lot more throughout the day.
Yeah.
You know, but do they have to be competitive, really?
No, they don't have to be competitive.
Could they not be complementary?
You see, complementarity comes in the business, I think.
Not necessarily. It's in the consumption
It's
even.
in the business model.
It's in the consumption even because digital is faster. There's no question about it. It can reach a much larger people within a much faster time. But the interaction with the paper, this is print. Just the interaction, the social aspect of it cannot be discounted. Because there are people, even in the digital age, who like and enjoy something they can see, read, touch. And what we're dealing with, or what we're discussing, is something new that has caught the world by storm. But whether it is something that will last indefinitely and that will completely overtake what we already have is now the discussion we're trying to figure out, and I'm saying it won't. It'll just have its space because once the fad element of digitalization is over, it'll settle. And when it settles, then people will have what I've called, another choice as to how it is.
Digital becomes the new normal.
Yes, it becomes the new normal. People will just have now an additional choice of how to consume whatever you are. And Verah's put it well when she talks about listening. Yes, you're talking about pocket. You're talking about podcasts. Yeah. It is just a different way of consuming.
It's another form of consuming information.
Yes, so all we've done is widened our choices.
Yeah, I think that one of widen choices of how you consume news. You can get it online. I mean, you can get it on the paper, or you can listen to it.
Yes.
But you see also, I mean, that's why, again, this listening to news, I mean, like what has been published in print, and then you listen to it. And this is where I was talking about, like, we tend to take long to adopt. Because around 10, 15 years ago, I remember there were audiobooks, like the BAM book. I never read it. Actually, I used to listen to it when I was going to work almost every day. But do we have any local books actually that have been made into audiobooks? You see, so that's why I was talking about adoption. Maybe it will happen in 5-6 years' time. That's why we are a bit slow. I mean, I'm talking about our environment. We are a bit slow in adopting this. And that is actually what we can say has also affected our growth in the digital space.
Verah, you disagree?
No, let me tell you something. In my opinion, I don't know whether this would get fired. Like, Kenyans are very quick in adopting technology.
Quick.
And very quick. Remember,
the consumer is ahead.
Which Kenyans are you referring to, Verah?
Clay. I do not go with a few.
No, this is not Clay. This is CT Muga.
Oh, CT Muga. I'm talking about.
But we seem to be the same age bracket, so the mistake is easily understood. Yes.
Okay. So looking at the way we have been selling the paper, even the smartphones, Pew Research produces that every time. Kenya was amongst the people to adopt the use of smartphones way faster than the others. The problem with the media, our reluctance of moving to this digital space, is actually the management.
Yep.
It has got nothing to do with the consumer
So
because
it's not a
I cannot
consumer who is slow.
consume.
And actually,
Yeah,
that's
it's not
why
a
I've been
consumer
saying
who is
adoption here means like
The
even
industry.
the producers themselves. Yeah, because if you take long to give it to those people, then how will they adopt it? That's what I've been talking about. That actually been slow as the producers themselves.
Vera, why do you
That's
think,
what I've been saying.
Vera, why is there a reluctance to adapt to all of this? Why is there a reluctance if it is from management point of view? And what do you think needs to be embraced?
For instance, taking media managers have that thing like I have to produce a content and I have to make money. So you have to understand sometimes they're afraid if I take this leap, am I going to affect what I know works, and it's going to make me have losses,
Or will I get an ROI?
Yeah, if you read the blogs by the New York Times editor-in-chief, he always expresses some of the anxiety he was going through when he was trying to put money into reporting in stuff like, the culinary industry, cooking and all that. So there's always that problem, the reluctance of traditional media to embrace the digital age because of the money factor. And also, I don't think our newsroom values the research bit of journalism. If you look at smaller newsrooms that have come up and really taken up the digital space, like The Correspondent in the Netherlands, unfortunately, I do not have African examples. There are roles like audience engagement, conversation editors. These are people to help you how people are interacting with you.
With their content.
So they tell you, they like this comment is being given that, and it's actually guided by, these people may not actually be journalists, they could be people in algorithms, people from an IT background.
Analytics,
then they inform the manager. They inform the manager that this is what's going on. And any media house that has succeeded in blending the print and the digital and successfully done it, moved from the golden broadcasting era, which was between the late 90s up to early 2000s in Africa and way much later in other parts of the world, they've had those roles. I don't think I've seen in Kenya, the digital editor, the managing editor for digital is also the person doing the algorithm, is also the person doing the audience engagement. And sometimes they actually do not even know free tools on the internet.
Yeah, you don't have the techies,
to help
basically.
them do that job.
Organizations like
actually,
BBC and Al Jazeera actually have media labs.
Exactly.
Like the BBC has a media lab that looked at what are people
whatever
consuming.
Verah has said, all that is what leads to this. We are poor in adapting or in changing.
But Claire, I'm asking, are we really poor?
I mean, that's
We are not poor.
digital
why,
printing and what
because
we're calling
I mean,
the
like
digital.
what she's saying, like we don't have researchers,
The industry
we
is
don't,
not
the
is not
industry
quick to move.
Is not
No.
quick to move.
And I'm
like,
trying to ask, where is
bring
it
in all
quick to
these
move?
people.
If digital printing as we know it, when did it really come to the fore? Late 1950s, 1970s. We started hearing about its proliferation in the 1990s. Okay? How many decades are those? And I'm not talking about Kenya. I'm not talking about the third world. I'm talking about the West, where these things emanated from.
What are you talking about? Digital printing.
The digital world as we know it. You see,
Actually, when you're in high
digitalization
school,
was called the third revolution. It was called the third industrial revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm saying it began a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
All I'm saying is that it always takes time everywhere.
Yeah, it's
For
not
industry to move.
to
Yes, it
Yeah.
takes time everywhere.
Unfortunately, in some cases, like now, in terms of consumption, when you're dealing with an audience, if an audience moves, then you're playing catch up. You keep giving us the example of Kodak, right? Kodak was among the first ones to actually move into digital photography,
They didn't simply ensure,
but then they
they
didn't.
didn't keep up with
Yes.
what made them the leaders. But industry
They were
does
sitting
that
there
all the time.
They were sitting there and they were still saying, you know what?
They're okay.
Touching a photo, when you have a printed photograph, It has value. You frame it on your wall, and everybody comes and they see that.
It still does. Even
But
that
still,
does.
actually,
today,
the framed ones are actually even now is more expensive.
Exactly. It still does.
And the 99%
but
of the things you have on
Kodak management,
Your phone
Kodak.
can disappear.
Kodak management
but
stuck to
actually-
that and stopped moving into what else can we do? How can we play into the digital era? And I think this is the same thing that you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Play.
think okay, like Kodak. I think I read somewhere like, okay, fine, they don't make those other things anymore, but
Fuji and so forth
most
overtook
of
them in certain things.
most
Yes,
of the
but
things actually in all these cameras that we have today
Kodak.
actually
Kodak.
they're owned by Kodak.
Yep.
So we might not see them physically.
But
But
their presence is there.
The presence is there.
I
Anyway,
want to ask Vera a question, and looking at the commercial aspect, Vera, the commercial aspect is something that quite a lot of media managers lean on when there's this reluctance to go, towards digital. Now, when we say digital, it's in the content like you've spoken about. Is that not a justifiable concern for them?
As I mentioned, that the reason why they're reluctant is they don't want to mess up with the money, because
Right.
you'll not be able to produce content if you don't have the money. Like sometimes I think we are always too hard on media managers. Oh, you don't do this, you don't do that. The conversation is like, we should be asking, why are you afraid of making the leap? And then also, I feel like people always see the product of the digital migration at the Z point. And they're at A. But between B and Y, there are small things that you need to do
Yep.
that does not look so much. Every time I try to tell them, why don't you try this? They're like, that will need a lot of money. I don't have a lot more money on my budget right now, so don't ask me for money.
Vera,
Some of these things are not for money.
Vera, the media in this country, they're a business.
everywhere the media is a business.
Yes, I'm narrowing it down to our country. It's a business, all right? Just throw your mind to the variety that exists. We're talking about papers. What about magazines? It's a whole array.
Yep.
The digital world has entered into this space. But why would a business person change when it doesn't interfere with their profit margins? Right now, the media in Kenya, I'm talking about Kenya specifically, is likely to embrace change a little quicker because they're not making money the same way they did. So they look for
But
cheaper
they have
options.
not been making money for a very long time.
No, I wouldn't call it a very long time.
It is for a long
No,
time,
no,
City.
no. I
No,
am in
some
the
time, not long.
industry.
How long is long?
I am in it. I am
Okay,
in it. We
how
began
long
the
is long?
financial recession in 2008. I'll tell you for a fact. From 2008 to this present, no media house has made profit.
That's 12 years.
Yes.
And you have
2008
evidence to support this.
Absolutely. Go to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Just
No,
look
I'm not
80
going to go
years
there. I
ago.
want you to tell me.
I'm telling you,
Oh,
we are no
fine.
longer in the golden age of broadcast or print.
I would not vouch for about the revenues and all that, but I do know that in 2010, actually, I was retrenched from a magazine. Actually, these were lifestyle magazines and glamour magazines by a South African company, which actually had
Oh, yeah.
invested here.
Yes.
So just the other day, they closed down the Kenyan operations or the East African operations, and 10 years now, they're actually closing down their South African
African
operations.
operations.
You see, so it could be true that the revenues of the print industry or has been dwindling, but I would not say probably that it's not been making money per se, because there've been advertisements here, there, maybe
Profits have been dropping. I mean,
yeah,
we're
profits
talking
a
about
bit-
the
yeah.
largest media houses, the Standard and Nation, are listed, and they announce their
Yeah.
their
So
profits
we
publicly.
can probably
so
say
they
that
always
they've
come
been-
and say the profit from this year to the next year. It always has been on a downward
Yeah, so
trajectory.
the media landscape, yes, has been doing poorly. But you see also, like...
And the biggest cash cow in these two media houses
has
is
been
the print.
yeah. But actually, as Verah mentions, that sometimes you need something and your media manager tells you, no, I don't have money for that. I don't have money for that. It's like that example I was giving you about content creators, where they probably you hear them complain like, oh, Kenyan media, they're only interested in what gives them money. They cannot. But this is a content creator. he or she does not actually create content for free. One thing they tend to forget is that actually media houses is full of content creators. That's what they do. Yes, you call them journalists. The other ones you call them content creators, but actually they
Everybody is,
and all this content needs to be monetized one way or the other. So one thing why actually you find that you need to do something and the media manager says like there is no money, that's where I always come back to, you're not operating in a vacuum. The overall economy of the country also affects actually how much the media can spend or how much, because it affects the advertisers, it affects like the cost of newsprint. That is one thing we never think about actually in this country, because most of the newsprint in Kenya is actually imported. You see, so we don't have local newsprint where probably I grew up in this country where the local newsprint industry, the local media industry were only allowed to import newsprint after they meet a certain quota of local newsprint. First, you buy newsprint from the local companies. Whether you ban it or whatever you do with it, the government does not care. You buy, you meet your quota, then you get a license to import. So the media works hand in glove with actually the development of the country, because when you buy, you also grow the economy, the local economy. But here what happens is that most of the money for the print, the newsprint, actually goes to other countries because we have to import it. So we don't actually support the local industry. And the local industry also, it does not, there's nothing much it produces. So it affects the overall growth of the economy and it affects the media more, you see. So if the economy is tanking, there is no way we're actually going to thrive. It's not going to work. And I think that's one thing also we need to factor in every time we call the media names or we say print media is not working. And then, okay, fine, 60 bob for the paper. That's a cover price. Actually, it is probably the same as giving the paper out for free.
For free. It's a free paper.
Because if you consider the cost of producing a paper, just look at the page, how much it costs to produce a page. Look at the time. Look at probably the photos there, how much you're going to pay for it. Look at the plate if you go through the whole thing from computer to plate to the transport and all that, the 60 bob actually cannot even produce one page. So I think these are some of the things that people tend to think like, okay, fine, wanauza gazeti pesa mingi 60 bob yote. But actually, they don't know that actually that 60 bob does not even cover the cost of producing half the page. You see, so we need to consider very many factors. Yes, newspaper is doing badly; it is tanking. But I think maybe for it to pick up, or for just the mainstream media to pick up in the digital space, they need to produce that content. They need to stop playing catch up with the consumer. You seem to be mixing these two,
and I want to understand why. For you, Clay Muganda, it sounds like print media is mainstream media.
No. What I mean to say is this, because I keep on saying because print media is basically being done mostly by the mainstream media. Yeah, the mainstream media. We have the TV, whatever, and all that, because we are the mainstream media industry. That's how it's called. That's why they call us the legacy media, because we still stick to these things. And that's why they call it the mainstream media. We are the lamestream media, the opposite of that, social media. You see, So because we are the ones who actually, we are the opposite of social media.
And yet you don't have to be the opposite of social media,
because that is how it's actually being looked at. Like, okay, fine. Oh, the mainstream media and the social media. Okay, fine.
And I'm saying the mindset also in the mainstream media is that you're separate. Mainstream media is different from social media, and I'm saying we don't have to be. If you look at the same way you said, if you looked at ourselves as content producers, this is our job. Our job is to produce content. How it's distributed,
and to monetize it,
how it's disseminated, whether it's on print, on digital platforms, that is not the issue. So we start then discussing how best do we disseminate this at a cost-effective and a way that reaches a wider audience and monetizes better.
I think the dissemination is probably, that's where I'm getting my lines mixed up and stuff like that. How to send it out there and how to make it
to make money
out of what we send out there. I think that is the problem.
I know we're coming to the end of this, but I want to just give it this perspective. We are witnessing the development of the media industry as we know it, and we're also witnessing the development of competitive media sources to what we have been accustomed to, what we keep referring to as print media. Now, this is, in any industry, this is something that always happens. And it'll have its highs and its lows. Something else is going to come up somewhere along the line. But a lot of these things are not just technological changes, but they're also a reflection of the change in society.
Verah, what would your closing remarks be?
Closing remark. I do not like giving statement like this is going to happen, that's not going to happen. I'll just tell media houses to. I'll tell media houses to be really open.
Going to die, Verah.
But that's the statistics. That's the statistics. I'm not saying that I did not come up with that. That is what the trend is showing.
Okay.
What I would like to tell media, the media journalism and stuff like that, they have to be open to the issue, to research. And by research, I don't mean publishing papers. I mean looking at how the market is going, and particularly for you, I don't think at this moment, regardless of the size, standard or nation, they don't need to appeal to everyone. Like, they need to know these are the kind of people that roll with us. I was about to say some bad word there. These are the people that are in our corner, and let's work with that.
But I
let's
think,
not just
I think
be in
that
the
goes
business
against
of just
probably the need of journalism as a public service.
In your closing remarks now. Okay.
Okay, fine.
Yours.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yours, Clay?
Verah is done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think the way forward is probably we just need to move with the times, and we should stop playing catch up with the consumer, as he said. So yes, we keep on complaining all the time when they say like, oh, the media is supposed to set the agenda and stuff like that. But I think also the audience that you're setting the agenda to should be receptive or should actually have the mental capacity to understand what you're feeding them. Yes, I'm sorry to say this, but
mental
I think
capacity.
Whoa.
Yes.
He has actually inadvertently referred to incapacity, but carry on.
Yeah, because there are very many factors actually. I mean, which yes is killing print media and basically journalism. I mean, mainstream media. One of them also is what's our level of literacy?
Okay. Thank you very much, Clay Muganda, writer and editor with the Standard Group, and Verah Okeyo, global health reporter and media researcher. As we conclude and come to the top of the hour, just listen to today's proverb from C.T. Muga.
It is the heart that is afraid of breaking that never learns to dance.
Umesikia hiyo, Verah? Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.